Hi guys. Well, we got the unemployment report this morning. Normally this comes out the first Friday of every month, but because this weekend is a holiday, they moved the release date to Thursday. So we now know the unemployment rate for June. It was 11.1%, which is a pretty good figure considering where we were at. Let me show you here. If we scroll down, you'll see that going back here to 2018, we're in the fours, and then by March or by February of 2020, we were at 3.5. That 3.5 was a 50-year low for unemployment. And then we have the pandemic and the lockdowns, and it goes up to 4.4% in March, and then a high of 14.7. That 14.7 number is the highest unemployment number we've had since the Great Depression of 1933. But it's getting better, right? We went from 14.7% in April to 13.3% in May to 11.1% in this report, which means a lot of those people that were unemployed, right, got their jobs back. And that's a good indicator. Let's scroll down a little further. This chart here shows the monthly change in non-farm payrolls. The number here is somewhat comparable to the ADP report we looked at in the last video. It shows the actual number of payrolls added. This, however, is not calculated by the ADP payroll company. It's calculated by the government. And it comes out in the same release that the unemployment numbers come out. You'll learn about this later on when we get to the unemployment indicators. For now, understand that this report is separated into two surveys. There's what's called the household survey, which is where we get the unemployment rate, and then there's the establishment survey, which is where we get these change in payrolls. It's like two sides of the same coin, right? Two ways of looking at the labor markets and what's happening. But take a look here. So we added 4.8 million jobs in June. Okay? That's up from adding 2.6, almost 2.7 million jobs in May. And that comes off of the loss of over 20 million jobs in April. Again, coincides with this recession and the lockdowns. Let's scroll down a little further here and take a look at this chart here. This shows the total non-farm payrolls. So instead of looking at the changes in payrolls, for example, in June, we added 4.8 million new payrolls to the economy. This shows the actual total. And so in June, we were at 137 million, and that's up from May, which was at 133 million. And so it makes sense. If you take 133 million and add the 4.8, you should get to 137 million. And you can see how this has changed. So total payrolls were increasing going back to 2018 all the way up to February. And then again, recession, lockdowns, and they start to drop off. And we shaved off a good 20 million plus jobs in this period so far. So we went from 152 to 151 down to 130. Okay. And now we're getting some of them back. But this is an important chart because it kind of shows that even though we're seeing increases in payrolls, increases in employment, we have a long ways to go to get back to where we were. Let's scroll down a little further. This is another example of payrolls shrinking by 20 million in April, and then we improve in May and we improve in June. So we're kind of filling in that hole that we dug. Okay. It also shows here the change in jobs since January in different sectors. So as I mentioned in the previous video, the service sector has been most impacted by the lockdowns, and you'll see that here. So if we go back to March, the service sector saw tremendous drops in jobs. At one point, almost 20 million jobs lost in April. Okay. Whereas the goods sector has not lost as much. Okay. At the worst month, we were a little over 10 million jobs. And then the government has lost maybe 6 or 7 million, okay, at the worst. So you can kind of get a sense of the sectors that are being affected, and note that those sectors that have the greatest losses are the ones that have the most significant increase, okay? Okay, let's scroll down a little further and take a look at this chart here. The unemployment rate that we see, the main one that hits the headlines, is determining a person as unemployed if they are not working but have looked for work in the last 4 weeks. So that's what you have to do to be considered unemployed. You have to not be working, and you have to have looked for work in the last 4 weeks, which essentially means that you don't have a job but you want one, right? You're available. But sometimes just looking at that group of people doesn't capture the full breadth of the unemployment situation, because a lot of people during a recession, they don't lose their job. They're still employed, but they lose hours. And that comes into play with a broader indicator. So if we redefine people unemployed as those that are, not working but have looked for work in the last 4 weeks, and those that are working part-time but would like to work full-time, if we include both those groups as unemployed, the unemployment rate will be higher. And that's what this chart shows us by differentiating between the main unemployment rate and the broader unemployment rate, which is known as the U6 unemployment rate. Okay, you'll notice they do tend to move together. For example, going back to 2009, we see the unemployment rates for both of them dropping. And in fact, the difference between the two is narrowing. But what's important is the most recent period where this year we see both indicators go up. But look what happened. The increase in unemployment for the main indicator is much smaller than the increase in unemployment for the U6 broader measure, which means if we just look at the headline unemployment rate, we understate the true burden of unemployment, right? Because this increase only captures people losing their jobs, whereas this increase captures people losing their jobs and losing hours but staying employed. Unemployment means not working, but that doesn't necessarily, from an economic standpoint, mean not working at all. So you could have a business, for example. Let's say you own a business and you have 2 workers, and each worker is currently working 40 hours a week. And because of the recession, you have to cut your payrolls. You have to cut workers. Well, are you more likely to terminate one worker to shave off 40 hours? Or would it be better for you to cut 20 hours from each worker? In both cases, as the employer, you've shaved off 40 hours, right? You either fire one worker, 40 hours gone, or you take 20 hours from each worker, 40 hours gone. In both cases, you're cutting your labor costs and dealing with the recession. But if you terminate a worker, it's going to show up here as an increase in unemployment. But if you shave off hours, it's not going to show up here because nobody lost their job, but it will show up here. So economists generally prefer to look at the broader U6 measurement and how it changes during a recession rather than the headline kind of unemployment figure that the general public sees. Okay, that's pretty much it for this video. There is more information in this article if you want to look through it on your own. But we will continue to track the economy and the labor markets as we progress through the course. And right now, we are seeing some positive indicators. So let's hope that continues and we get back to normalcy as soon as possible. Thanks, guys. Let me know if you have questions.